All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to episode number 18 of the Movie Mates podcast. Connor, we're back here talking about yet another movie, a movie that I decided to choose this week, a movie that, you know, I didn't even know existed before like a few weeks ago, or maybe a month ago, and that's called The Prestige. And this movie is directed by Christopher Nolan. So I was I was really surprised I hadn't heard of it before because I love. I mean, most people love Christopher Nolan movies. At least a lot of them, right? A lot of them are really famous.
Yeah, especially in our age bracket, like
Yes.
a lot of young people
Well, because they
love
came
Christopher
out,
Nolan.
in the mid to early 21st century, mid to early
Yep.
2000s. So we
Yeah,
grew
the
up with a
mid
lot of
to
those
early
movies.
21st century. Yeah,
The
the
way,
middle of the
yeah,
21st
no,
century.
the way I said that was a little weird, but
Oh, I get you.
but yeah, no, I mean, so I had never seen this movie before. I'd never even really heard of it. And Connor, had you heard of this before?
Yeah. So when I first started getting interested in film, Christopher Nolan was like a big influence
Mm.
on me,
Okay.
and I made it a point to see some of his films that I had when obviously I heard about the Dark Knight trilogy, Inception, Interstellar.
Mm.
Those are like the big ones that were popular around like 2014, 2015. And then I think that I sought it out because I was like, oh, I was just Googling him and I saw there was this other movie he did that was about magicians and it had Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale and it's directed by Christopher Nolan. And I was like, how am I not going to see this? So I like pirated it online somewhere when I was in like early high school. And I also saw Memento, which was really good as well. I don't know if you've seen that, Ryan.
I've not seen that either. And it was good.
Yeah, it's really good. It's obviously at the beginning of his career in terms of like scope, it's a lot smaller and it's like a lot.
I see.
It's a lot less expensive of a film,
but it's still good.
Yeah, no, it's still great. And not to spoil what I think about this film or anything like that.
Sure.
But yeah, I did see it. I think around when I was maybe 14 or 15.
Okay.
And then I think I've seen it twice because I think I was like, oh, my mom would like this. So I made my mom and my sister watch it and I watched it again. So I think I've seen it twice before.
Wow. So
but I haven't seen it in like 7 or 6 or 8 years, something like that.
All right, so it's been quite a while. I mean, but still, you're quite the Prestige pro. I mean, this is your third time watching the movie.
I think so. I think I've seen it twice.
And it's a good perspective to have, for us here because like I had only seen this once, and you getting to rewatch it, knowing the plot of the movie, like
right, yeah,
like,
it's two different experiences. We both have different perspectives.
Yeah, so like my question would be later on, like was it better rewatching than watching the first time? But we can kind of get into talking about like the premise of this movie or like the start of this movie. So this movie, by the way, has a really good cast, which a lot of Christopher Nolan movies do. But this one, Christian Bale, Hugh Jackman, obviously, Michael Caine,
A-list,
yeah, and it's Scarlett Johansson. I mean, this cast is really solid, really good.
Yeah, and it wasn't. When was this movie made?
2006.
Okay, so this is before Scarlett Johansson was really like a big name, and I think probably before Christian Bale was a big name also because like before the Dark Knight came.
Didn't it start making in 2008?
Yeah, the Dark Knight was 2008, but the Batman Begins I think might have been 2004 or 2006. I don't remember exactly.
I don't know exactly either, but
it was 2005, so it was a year before this was Batman Begins. So that's probably what most people associated him with at that time.
Sure,
Batman.
Sure, yeah, that makes sense. But this movie.
I mean, Hugh Jackman was big though at that time because of X-Men.
Yeah, I mean that was early 2000s when it first started, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think, yeah. So no, he was big by then. But it's cool, just to, looking back, like all these actors and actresses, a lot of them are like super famous. So it's just cool looking back and seeing the same movie like that.
It has Andy Serkis also. Who
it does.
Gollum and Caesar. He's the guy who does all the
voices.
What do they call it? Motion capture. Yeah.
Oh yeah, he played Snoke. Didn't he, in Star Wars?
Yeah.
So yeah, no, this cast really was really good. And it, I feel like it showed in the movie, but we can kind of get started talking about this movie. So this movie, Connor, was about two magicians, right?
Yeah,
Who, you know, I guess worked together, to start their careers out, right? But
right,
then ended
right.
up becoming bitter rivals, right? As
Yeah,
as
yeah,
time
yeah.
went on.
So they kind of show you like where their relationship leads to at the beginning of the film,
Yeah.
with one of them basically responsible or supposedly responsible for the death of the other.
Well, they make it look that way, yes.
Yeah, yeah. So the opening of the film basically shows us that these two magicians end up kind of having this. I don't know. They don't really give you too many details at the beginning, but they show you basically the climactic show of the
Yeah.
film,
At,
where
you
uh,
go ahead.
yeah, where Angier, which is Hugh Jackman's character, drowns himself, or drowns, not necessarily drowns himself, right?
He drowns, yeah.
He drowns underneath the stage in a big water tank with a real lock that you can't escape from. And Christian Bale's character, Borden is there watching. And so basically he gets charged with murder.
Mm-hmm.
And so most of the film is about how we got to that point, I think, right?
Yes.
Starting off with when they were partners,
Yep.
or not partners, or assistants,
They were like co-assistants, yeah, basically.
Yeah, they were like, yeah.
They were assistants to the lead magician of a show.
When they were young men.
Yeah.
And so Angier's wife is also one of the assistants helping out. She's like the stage hand. She's like the actual assistant on stage. And they're like the guys who volunteer from the audience, basically.
Yeah. So, like Connor said, the movie starts out, and a lot of times, Connor, I'm skeptical when movies start out like that. They start out with like a really, like seemingly a big scene, right? A scene where
right.
you watch a guy like you watch Borden, who is Christian Bale's character, watch Angier just die in front of him, and he didn't even seem that concerned. The way they showed it to us, like he just kind of watched him.
Yeah.
Right. Is kind of the way it looked. So it looked really strange.
So it seems like
going in.
And they show you him like shoving his way backstage too. So
it seems premeditated. Like
it does. It seems planned that he intended for this to happen.
Mm-hmm.
He somehow maybe planted the water tank there to make sure he fell into that or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it was it was a strange start in terms of like jumping to the future like that. But we stay in the future for a little bit, right?
Yes.
So I think soon after this, we see Borden in jail, right? And we see him in trial, right? Talking about the trial that's happening for the murder that he supposedly committed.
Yep. And Michael Caine is testifying against him.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, he was helping out Hugh Jackman with his show. And so he believes that there was somehow some sort of interference, or that he somehow got the water tank in there and intentionally murdered Hugh Jackman, basically.
Yeah. But the point, something important to note is, they don't give you a lot of information this first time through, right? So when you're watching this, you're not really getting much information. You're just kind of witnessing certain events, and it's cut in a way that makes it seem very like obscure. Like, all right, it looks like he killed them, right? It looks like this guy killed Angier.
Yeah.
So it's very shady
and you don't really know exactly how the trick is supposed to work.
Yep.
And it makes sense that you don't, right? Because Michael Caine is like, I'm not going to give up that information. It's like too valuable to the community or whatever.
It's like his career will be ruined, right?
Yeah. So he's like, basically by he, I mean Christopher Nolan, makes it so that the information that is withheld makes sense in terms of like how the story is being played out. It's not like the characters are not saying stuff just for the sake of mystery, right?
Yeah.
It actually fits into the context of the trial and what's going on and what you're seeing.
Yeah, exactly. So it's an interesting start, when it starts out in the future like that. And I think right after this, Connor, I think we jump back a little bit into the past because Angier is alive.
Well, what happens is Borden is in jail.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy, this representative of this Lord, was it like Crowley or Lord something?
There was a representative of some Lord who ended
Lord Caldlow.
It was okay. Is
and
it
so this like
Caldlow, yeah.
this representative of Lord Caldlow comes to Borden as he's in jail and says, I have like basically this deal from Lord Caldlow that says if you give up your secrets, so you know you're gonna die probably anyways in this trial. You're gonna probably be sentenced to death. If you give us your secrets, Lord Caldlow wants them to all your tricks, then we will take care of your daughter for you because she'll be without parents. Basically, is the deal, right?
Yeah.
And as like some sort of promise or something, he's like, oh, and here's the journal of Angier that they somehow have. Like he says, like I think that they purchased it or something like that from Angier's
Angier's
estate.
journal?
Yeah. That's how
Oh,
Borden gets Angier's journal from that
yeah.
representative
And
guy.
he's reading it. And Andrew's journal is kind of, it's kind of talking about like him reading Borden's journal, which we get into later.
Right. So that's how we jump back in time, is because
Yeah.
Borden starts reading what Angier has journaled years ago, and so then it jumps back in time to Angier like on a train with Borden's journal.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So it's like there's three, and then that takes us back to the initial, basically inciting incident, which is when they were the stage hands helping out.
Yeah. So there's three different at the beginning. There's three different like time points in the movie, and it's pretty clear to me, right? I don't know about you. It's pretty clear, right? Because Angier's dead in one, so you're like, okay, you know, obviously this is a different time point, and then obviously he can't be on the train in Colorado and in Britain doing a show, right?
Yep. Yeah. So in one timeline, Angier's dead. It's just Borden in the prison, essentially.
Yeah.
In another timeline, it's just Angier a few years ago by himself in America trying to find a machine to do a trick. And then the third timeline is both of them in London years before that, I think, right?
Yes.
Or at least
that's
some time before that.
Yeah. So, you know, we get introduced to each of these storylines, and, you know, we see Angier at the hotel in Colorado up on some mountain looking for some sort of technology or scientist or person. We don't really know, right? But he's looking for someone or something.
He meets, that's where we meet Andy Serkis, who's like,
he's the assistant.
And he basically says like, oh no, Mr. Tesla can't see you. So we know he's like looking for Nikola Tesla at that point.
Yes.
But he is a big fan, also Andy Serkis is, which I thought was a cool character touch, that he's like a fan of Angier and his like magic, basically.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, sure. But so that's that, we get introduced to that, and then soon after, Connor, I think we get introduced to that timeline all the way back in the past, which is pretty much where we are for most of the rest of the movie, with some intermittent time jumps to, you know, the mountain with Tesla and a few time jumps to Borden in prison. But for the most part, I would say it sticks in the past all the way back at the beginning of the story.
Yeah. And I think they use voiceover and narration as like a part of the journals as a good way to transition you back and forth between time periods, so you know exactly what's going on. And I think that was very clear. Not clear as in it was like, oh, like they're just making this like complicated for no reason or something like that, right? It was clear in the way that you're like, you could slowly start to see the story unraveling, and it made it like more interesting, I thought, to watch, you know?
Yeah, of course. But yeah, the narration also, like you said, it definitely, you know,
it helped.
It helped you, like, you know, like, oh, okay, so now we're here. Like, it just helped you like register real quick, right? Instead of like maybe not realizing right away.
Yeah.
So yeah, that definitely helped. But, you know, I wanted to start back in all the way at the beginning of the story, Connor, if that's okay. And this is, you know, when they were both assistants, right? And they were working together with Cutter, who was like managing the show, but they were all working together on a magic show. And basically nothing of substance happens. They basically, you know, they get picked out randomly in the crowd, and they're tying a knot to put Angier's wife, you know, the actual assistant, you know, inside like a cage, tied up underwater.
And then she escapes. Basically, she escapes from her from like,
her
the
knots, and
then
locks.
She like reaches out and like undoes the thing and climbs out. Essentially, I think, right? Yeah, that's how the trick works.
That's basically how, and they do it behind like a curtain, and then she's, you know,
and then she's free.
Yep. So that's how that works, and it all goes off without much of a hitch until Andrew's wife she tells Borden, and Borden tells her that they should try this
Yeah.
new knot, this more
Okay.
advanced knot.
I
Yeah.
thought that was a really important scene when they're all backstage after that first performance, when they're like
Okay.
all talking and Borden is saying like the magician that they work for, like he doesn't take any risks, like he's so boring, like
Mm-hmm.
and you could see like the difference between Borden and Angier's characters there, I thought, and the different ways they talked about that.
100%. And this is really an interesting scene, Connor, that you point this out, because to me this kind of it shows the evolution of Andrew's character from beginning to end. Because if you know what he is in the beginning versus how he acts in the end, you see the total evolution and transition of like what he believes and what he does from beginning to end.
And I would argue that you also can see the transformation in Borden's character. And Borden's character is a weird thing to say, but we can get into that later.
Yeah, we'll get into that as we go on. But talking about Borden's character, and I don't want to be jumping around too much, but in regards to Borden, I think that I don't know that he changed that much. I think he always.
Ooh, that's a hot take. All right.
Okay.
I strongly disagree, but I can explain that when we talk about the end.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So I mean, we can continue on. So basically, they're talking, and Borden's like, yeah, this guy's so boring, this magician. You spice it up with I think one thing that he talked about was a bullet catch. Like, do something like that. Something cool. And Angier's like, no, it's way too dangerous. Blah blah blah. Basically, showing they disagree. Later on, they do the same thing again. Same things happening. Except they try. Seemingly, it looks to us, right? What it looks like to us is Borden and Andrew's wife agree, kind of like unspokenly, to do a new knot.
Yeah, there was like a little nod between them, and I think the reason that that they thought that other knot might be better is because it's tighter, and so she would be more secure when she's lifted up, and there wouldn't be as much of a risk of her like falling and breaking her leg as she's getting lifted up, right?
Yeah. So, and they also thought it was like easy enough to slip out of, obviously.
Yeah. But they didn't do it just for the sake of it being more difficult to slip out of.
No.
There was an actual reason.
Like they didn't want to do it just for like the challenge. Yeah. It wasn't,
yeah.
So basically that's what they do, or at least that's what it looks like they do.
Right.
And then it goes wrong. And you can kind of tell, Connor, like to me, like when I first watched like the first time through, I was like, I feel like this, I didn't see her in the future at all. I didn't see her with him on the journey to Colorado. And I was like, uh-oh, like something's going to happen to her. I didn't know what it was. And it turns out something did happen to her, right? So the knot obviously didn't work. She was unable to get out in time. And they weren't unable to break the glass in time. And she died.
Yeah.
She drowned.
Yeah. And I think you can tell that Borden feels responsible.
Oh, 100%. 100%. But this is where it gets interesting, Connor, because right after this, you see the funeral of Andrew's wife, you see her funeral and everything, and you see Borden show up. And Angier asks him, like, what knot did you tie
here?
Well, he also said, which knot did you use?
Yeah.
And Borden said, I don't know.
Yeah.
He's like, how could you not know?
Yeah.
And the audience thinks the same thing. I thought the same thing. Like, how can you, like, you have to know. You have to know.
Yeah.
And later on, we realize why he didn't know, but still, it was just a really weird, like you could understand the frustration of Angier, right? Like you could see the pain in Borden as well, but he just didn't know.
Do we want to talk about this movie as if we know Borden's secret, like now, or do you want to like talk about it at the end? Because I feel like it could add a lot of context to the scenes if we talk about it throughout the movie.
Yeah, I mean, here, like, so we can talk about it like from the perspective of already knowing what happened, because I guess it does shed a lot of light onto it. So basically what ends up happening, what ends up being the case is that Borden has a twin or a second version of himself, basically.
Essentially a twin. They're twins.
Essentially a twin. They're twins. I'll talk about what I think in a little bit. But anyway, they're twins. And so this is very important because throughout this whole movie, even the beginning part, right, where, with the knot tying and like the not knowing which knot was tied, this all makes much more sense if you know that Borden has a twin and they live Borden's life, right? They each alternate every day.
They're both Borden.
They're both Borden, but then one of them obviously isn't Borden when the other one is. So they switch on and off. So they live two people live one life.
Right. And when he says, I don't know which knot I tied, I think he literally doesn't know because it's the other guy who tied the knot, right? So
yeah, so he legitimately doesn't know. And obviously it's going to anger Angier because Angier has no idea that he has a twin that looks exactly like him, right? That lives his life as well. He wouldn't understand. So obviously he's angry. That happens. And I think that was Connor, right? The end of this first kind of part of them working together, and they never work together again. They both end up going solo, right? Borden ends up going solo quicker than Angier, right? And we kind of get into, this.
Yeah. Because Borden, he kind of starts putting on like a little small show.
Like mini shows, at small venues, right, for small amounts of people. And I don't know if we want to talk about him meeting his wife, but he met his future wife, I should say.
Right.
I believe Sarah was her name.
Yeah, and he basically like helped her nephew like get over like the death of a bird because her nephew like thought that was what was happening or something.
And he's like, wow, you're clever, because like most people are like, oh wow, the bird's still alive, it's fine. But really, like, the magicians do, like, or at least Borden, the way he does it is he actually does kill a bird and then have it reappear.
And I just wanted to point out real quick that that bird trick is like fairly omnipresent throughout the whole movie, right? Like they go back to that trick a lot, of, like making the bird disappear, making it reappear.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like the main trick that Borden and Angie are like struggling to be each other with, right? But on the scale of a human, making a human disappear and reappear. Like not just disappear and reappear, but like transport it somewhere else.
Move it from one place to another, right? In seemingly an instant, right?
Yeah. And so I just thought that was cool that they kept like having that bird trick like throughout the film,
Yeah, sure. No, it was definitely, and I think when Cutter was talking about the 3 acts of a trick, I think he also used a bird right at the end.
Yeah. And you can see the cost of that trick too, right? Like a bird loses its life.
Yeah.
Every time
the trick is done.
Yeah. And is that moral? Like probably not, right? But
is the killing of a bird an okay price to have so many people be in awe and wonder?
Yeah, and that's kind of like a mini kind of scale of what the bigger tricks are about, right? Like there's so many more morality questions with the the main tricks.
Yes. Yes. We'll get into this. I want to move through this because there is a lot to talk about. Basically what happens is they both launch their solo careers. They both try to sabotage each other.
The first thing that happens is that Borden tells his wife that he's going to try and do a bullet catch to get more people in, right?
Which would be a cool trick, honestly.
No, I think, And so he's like just performing at a bar, I think.
Yep.
But the person he gives the gun to shoot him is Angier, who puts a real bullet down in there.
Like,
because he's just so traumatized by, it looks like he's been really struggling with his wife's death, essentially, right? And he really needs to know, like, did Borden tie that knot, right?
Sure. But, Connor, I'm not going to lie. When I first watched it, I barely even realized it was Angier. I'm going to be honest. I thought it
really?
was, yeah. Like, I don't know. I didn't realize until, like, after he shot. I was like, oh, like, that was Angier. I think maybe
he said, like, what knot did you tie? He said that, though.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't realize. I thought maybe it was, for some reason I was like, oh, maybe this is some some angry guy who somehow knew. But I was like, wait a minute, that's not right. That has to be Angier. But anyway, they both sabotage each other, right? So after that,
So
Angier loses 2 fingers, or not? Borden does. I mean, sorry.
Yeah, because Angier shoots him with that. With that gun, and he loses the 2 fingers.
Yes, and then an important piece to note is that after he loses those fingers, he's back at his house one day with Sarah, and she's like, "Oh wow, how is it still bleeding?" Like,
Yeah.
and that's
It's like
because
it just
they
barely
cut off
happened.
his fingers of his twin.
Yeah,
Is
and his
why.
twin is constantly once he becomes married, his twin is like constantly around as this assistant
Assistant, yeah.
known as Fallon, who doesn't really speak and has
Ever.
really good prosthetics to make him look not like Borden, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. So he's always around, but you don't know who he is. You just think he's some shady, like loyal assistant, I guess.
And I feel like, I mean, maybe it's like, because I knew who he was the entire movie. Did you like? Was there any point where you were like, oh, I think that he is suspicious or anything like that?
Like, I didn't think that he was like his twin or anything, if that's what you're asking. No, I did not. I didn't. My friends and I were talking about this because we watched it a few days ago, right? And we were like, there was no, at least to us, there was like no indication of like in that timeline that they were twins. To me,
yeah.
There's some points later on that maybe you can get it, but it takes a while, in my opinion, to really.
Yeah, no, and at that point, he's become so ingrained in the storyline that you just take him in as another character, right? So
yeah.
And
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, I don't mean to keep interrupting, but we were talking about them sabotaging each other. Yeah. Just to move quickly through this, Hugh Jackman's character Angier gets back into performing with Michael Caine as his like assistant.
Yeah.
And they make up this like really neat like bird disappearing trick where they don't actually kill the bird. I thought that was actually pretty cool.
It was a neat contraption, but basically, yeah, Borden ends up just coming up and smishing the bird.
Yeah, and breaking the fingers of the other volunteer. Yeah.
So, they both sabotage each other. You are right. And basically, this kind of goes on basically until Borden develops a new trick. Right. And this is where it gets interesting. Borden develops a new trick, and all of a sudden he's becoming popular. He's becoming very popular. He's becoming very well known. People are talking about him. And it's a trick called the transporting man. And everyone's talking about it. He goes through one door, comes out the other. Seemingly in an instant. And no one can figure out how he does it. And it's the most talked about trick across the whole country. And Angier is angry. He wants to know how he does it. Right? Isn't that right? I don't know if you.
Yeah, because he doesn't. It's become at this point for him, it's more personal than it is about his wife's death. Like that was like the start of it all. But at this point, he's like, I need to be better than this guy.
It became a competition, not just like revenge. Yeah. Yeah. And so basically he ends up copying him, but he doesn't know how Borden does the trick. He has no idea. He's like, he didn't know how he did it. But what ended up happening was he hired someone who looked exactly like him to do the trick with him. But Connor, right, the price was that Angier had to end under the stage and watch the other guy, his double, get all the applause.
Yes, and he hated that. He hated that. And this is also where we get introduced to Scarlett Johansson's character, Olivia. She ends up being Angier's assistant, where, Connor, I don't really know how to feel about her story, like this whole secondary storyline we have with her. I thought it was pretty good overall. Like, I think that the whole storyline, there's a storyline with Olivia and I don't know if, Connor, you want to just talk about this whole storyline right now, just like the underlying one. Sure. Yeah,
with Olivia and Sarah, Angier and Borden, all four of them, right? This kind of relationship dynamic between them. Like, I thought it was pretty good. I didn't know which side Olivia was going to be on when she ended up going to Borden. And
I still, and as the movie goes on, I feel like I still didn't know.
Yeah.
Until we get to the point where Angier realizes that Borden's journal is completely faked and set up. Yeah. That was the point where I realized, oh, she's on Borden's side, basically.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Because she was supposedly going to help Angier get the secret, right, of how he did the trick, how Borden did the trick, and she didn't do that, right? So it ended up all being a trick.
She gives him the journal essentially instead.
Yeah, which was a setup.
Before that happened, Angier sent her to spy on Borden.
Yeah.
And Borden is irritated that he would do that and that he stole his trick idea. So Borden, he does that whole thing where he like breaks Angier's leg and like hangs his double like from the ceiling in the middle of the show to like show that his magic is better or something like that.
And then it's like come across the other side, like the other theater across the street. Yeah.
And
that was really cool. That was really clean. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, I thought that, in my opinion, was the worst thing that Borden did in this film.
Yeah.
I thought that.
Yeah, a lot of stuff Borden, we can talk about this, Connor, but I want to talk about like who was the worst person, and Borden was definitely the better person in my opinion throughout this whole movie. From the perspective of like watching, I just thought Angier was the worst person as the movie went on, but we can talk about that at the end. Yeah, just going back real quick to the Olivia and the whole storyline she had with
of course
Borden and Sarah. I thought it was good, especially knowing that they're twins. The Borden, there's two Bordens.
Yeah, I think it's not like he's just cheating on his wife.
Yeah, I thought it was much better, and to me, it was bittersweet. It was kind of sad because he couldn't tell them, or the trick was ruined. He couldn't tell them, or half the life was a lie. They would hate him. But they each loved a different girl, and it was just so sad for all four of them, honestly.
Right. It costs the two men. It costs them their own. I'm not going to say happiness because I think they were content with like what they were doing. They really loved like the strike and stuff.
A part of their happiness, right?
Yeah, it cost them like half of a life and a partner. They both weren't able to get a partner, and I think it cost both women their happiness. Obviously, Sarah kills herself.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that, Connor. Why did she kill herself? What did she say? She said to Borden, she said, "I know." She said, "I know." What did she know? What did she think she knew? Do you know?
Maybe she knew the truth.
That's what I was wondering, but I didn't.
Yeah, she knew he had a twin, but she couldn't bring herself to talk about it or tell anyone because she knew how much that would hurt him and how much that would ruin all that he's worked for.
So you think so you think she did know that he had a twin, and that okay.
Yeah. And I think I think she was like mentally ill, right? Like, she ended up having depression. Of course. So not that suicide is like an appropriate answer to that, but I mean, I felt as though it made sense for her character at that point in the story, which I thought that she actually had really good character development too throughout.
Oh, she did. Yeah. You could see the slow spiral, right? You could see it. She was so happy to start, kind of, encouraged him. And then slowly, she went to drinking, right? And then it eventually kind of
I think she saw how much because there was that theme of like, oh, you don't love me today. And I think that those
twins.
Yeah, that was the biggest hint, I think, as to the double life throughout the film for the most part.
Yeah, 100%. And it also hints that she knew for a while, or at least she eventually knew.
Yeah. I think that she could tell, or that she felt that he was obsessed with magic, right?
Yes. She felt that he loved magic more than he loved her.
Which is totally possible, right?
It's very possible. Yeah,
even the twin that did love her could have, like, to him, it was worth more to keep his magic life going, his alter ego life going, than to live happily with.
Yeah, Connor, to me, this was a cool theme to me. And it was a theme that I saw throughout the movie, right? Obsession was a big thing. Obsession was a big thing in this movie. More specifically, obsession with your job, with what you do, what your work is.
Over relationships with other people.
Yes, with other people. How dangerous it is to prioritize your job over relationships with real people. And you see that, you see both sides. You see Sarah's side, right? She just wants to, love her husband, and she wants to just spend time with him, and she wants him to love her more than he loves his job. But clearly that's not always the case, or not even the case at all. And then you see Borden's perspective, which is you have to live the trick. He said something like almost identical to that when they saw the old Chinese magician.
Right.
He lives the trick. He pretends to be
crippled,
but in reality he's strong enough to hold a fishbowl with water and a goldfish in it
between his legs as he's walking.
That's crazy. But to me that perfectly encompasses Borden's like thought process, or like his mind, right? Both of the twins, honestly. Like they
Yeah,
lived the trick. Ever since that point
and
is
he keeps bringing up this idea of sacrifice whenever he's talking to Angier, like you don't understand the sacrifice or whatever,
mhm,
right? And I think that
he doesn't.
that's yeah, because he's literally sacrificing half of his life
Yeah.
for this trick, right?
Hmm.
So
Yeah. So it's definitely I really do I really like that theme of um uh, just like like dedication to a fault, right?
mhm.
Obsession to a fault.
Yeah, and
At the
you can see that
cost of
with Hugh Jackman's character too, right?
yes, yes, and that's what I wanted to move on to next. So Hugh Jackman's character obviously, goes solo, right? He does this act, the same act, except he doesn't get to be up top. After like they swap him and his body double,
Yep.
and he doesn't like it. So basically, he in his body double started making demands, and anyway, so he started. This is where he
Yeah,
ends up
and he
going.
gets ruined. His reputation gets tarnished by that whole incident where Warden like broke his leg, basically. So
Yeah, yeah. And then basically what happened was he kidnapped the body the twin.
he
And
doesn't know it's a
he
twin
didn't
though.
he
He
doesn't
just
know
thinks
it's a
it's
twin.
the
He thinks it's the assistant, but he captures him and puts him digs him buries him underground. And to me, this is the slow descent into Angier's kind of spiral into immoral, just being immoral, just kind of losing all semblance of morality to me.
Mhm,
Angier did, when this started,
mhm.
burying someone underground
Yeah, unless he gets like the
for,
secret to
yeah, to Borden's trick.
right, right.
So, basically this is what leads him to go to Colorado because Borden wrote Tesla and Tesla's in Colorado,
Yeah,
right? That
he
that was the hint
says
he gave him.
mhm. He says Tesla is like the how I got the trick, and also it's the cipher to this journal. So now he can read the journal too, right? So
Yes. Which we ended up finding half of that to be a lie, I guess, right?
mhm.
But
Yeah.
sorry, go
Well,
ahead.
at that point, I just want to say once you get to that point in the film, it drops down to only two timelines essentially, right? Because now we know how he gets to Colorado.
Yes.
So now it's only the timeline where Angier's in Colorado and Borden's in London,
Hmm.
and then the present day where Borden's
Yeah.
arrested and Angier's dead.
Yeah. So basically, there's not much going on. Borden is kind of living the life, famous, doing shows with the Transported Man. And
Mhm.
Olivia is his assistant.
Yeah.
He's in love with Olivia and Sarah, that whole dynamic.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, it's not exactly he's living the life, right? Because he's having a lot of relationship issues.
he's not.
Hmm.
But when I say that, I mean there's just not a lot of like going on in terms of the plot right at that time. It's just kind of
Yeah.
just like he's kind of just smooth sailing, quote
Hmm.
unquote, at least
Yeah.
from the viewer's perspective.
Hmm.
But Angier is in Colorado, and I want to talk about this, Connor. I want to talk about the whole Tesla thing. What were your thoughts like on in general? Just
Well, actually,
viewing
when I
Tesla.
first watched the movie, I thought that
Yeah.
the Colorado stuff was the Colorado scenes were the slowest and the most boring. They were interesting, but I just thought that compared to the rest of the movie, they just didn't intrigue me as much, if
Hmm.
you know what I mean. I don't
Yes.
know how you feel about it.
Yeah. See, I agree. There was the slowest part. I also thought that it was weird because I never know how to feel about this, Connor, because Tesla was supposed to be a scientist, right?
Yes.
We obviously see him do things that are beyond general scientific capabilities, right? With the machine he built.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, of course. I mean, this is like completely fictional, right?
Yeah,
But
but my point is I never know how to feel about that because like it always depends. I don't think I care much when a movie introduces like fictional like like things that can't be done in real life like into a movie where the
but
rest of
it
the movie is totally like real.
okay, yeah. Well,
Do
does
you
it
know what I
bother
mean?
you that he was actually a real person
Yeah,
and
I
that they
think
used him
I
in
no
that
well I
way?
think if it like if you're saying because they also called him a scientist like he does science like that I
Mhm.
remember them saying
Yeah.
this is science,
Well,
right? um
excuse me. Oh my
Bless you.
gosh.
Yeah, but
Um,
I don't know how to feel about that. I think it's fine. I don't really mind it, but in the back of my head, it's like I wish someone acknowledged, like, wow, this is real magic. Like I just wish they like,
well, there was one point where Hugh Jackman said, "This is real magic." When Andy Serkis's character like showed him the lights that were not connected to wires, like in the snow.
yes, yeah,
You
yeah, yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
It said there's a generator like 10 miles away or something.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But I think that they stayed true to the person that Tesla actually was in real life, because he did kind of have that reputation of being, he was kind of ousted from the community because of a lot of his scientific advances, which
Is
seemed too radical at the time, Yeah.
Okay.
So even though this machine couldn't actually be built in reality, I think that it felt like it would be something that Tesla would do if anybody could do it back then. It seems like a Tesla thing, I don't know.
Sure. No, yeah. I was just wondering what your thoughts were on it. I generally don't mind when a movie like incorporates some like fictional aspect of science that like we haven't discovered yet. Like other Nolan movies like Tenet, right? Inception does that at the end with the black hole stuff. So there's a lot of there's a lot of movies that do that, especially Nolan movies like So I don't particularly mind it. I was just
and I actually did enjoy the Tesla stuff more this time around, because I was like looking for certain things and like how it progressed. But I will say it was kind of weird because you don't really have a sense. You have a sense that Angier is there in Colorado for a while, but you don't really know how long. And then he like goes to visit them, and they like try to make the hat, disappear and reappear, and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And then he like comes back later, and they're like, I feel like when he comes back later, like, it would have been enough time for them to like mess around with it a lot. But at that point, it's like, oh, now we're finally going to try a cat, even though it hasn't worked with the hat. And it's like, what else have they been doing in all that time?
Like it's been seemingly months, right? At least.
Yeah. At least weeks, right?
Or weeks. So it's like, I feel like it went a little slow. Like you could have taken maybe a scene or two out of like, they went out for lunch, they were just, there were a bunch of scenes where they were just talking. But
I did appreciate the Tesla conversations that he had with Angier, like, like about obsession, or like the note that Tesla wrote to him at the end about destroying the machine.
He's like, he gave him the machine, but he recommended he destroy it, which I thought that was like, Tesla, just do him the favor and destroy it yourself.
Yeah, I guess he's like, I took this guy's money, like I better just give it to him.
Yeah, that's true. But anyway, he builds him the machine, and Connor, basically what the machine does is it actually makes a duplicate of whatever is in the machine. Yeah. So it made a duplicate of hundreds of hats, right? From when they
and duplicated the cat too.
Yeah. Yeah. So Angier gets this machine, and I guess he ends up going back. He ends up going back to England, right? And he ends up doing his trick, or he sets up for his trick, I should say. He sets up for his trick, and he doesn't tell anyone what it actually is.
Okay, I also want to point out that the way that they show it is like, oh, they discovered that the machine actually duplicates things instead of like just making them disappear and reappear. And Tesla's like, okay, and you'll work out some kinks, come back in a few weeks, right? So when you see him finally get the machine, you're like, oh, maybe he's worked it out so that it doesn't duplicate things anymore, right?
True.
Like when you're watching him perform the trick and you see him disappear and then like
reappear at the top of the
you're like, oh, maybe Tesla made it so that it actually does what it's supposed to do, right? Like you don't know for sure that it still creates duplicates,
Yes, that is true. But he gets the machine, right, and he sets it up. He doesn't tell anyone how he does his trick.
Yeah, he has blind stagehands.
But he has blind stagehands, which kind of, obviously watching it another time gives you a clear indication of what's going on. But as a first-time viewer, you really don't know why does this guy have a bunch of blind guys running this show?
Well, you just think it's like, oh, he just doesn't want to
know what the machine does, the true capabilities. Yeah. But you don't really know why. And he doesn't want Cutter backstage for obvious reasons. And Connor, I think at this point, right, he comes back and he wants to get Borden to his show, right?
Yeah, he wants to get Borden's attention.
He wants to draw him in, and he does get his attention.
Yes, he does, and he does the trick, and it's better than Borden's trick. Right?
It looks cooler. I mean, honestly, like in reality, Borden could do something similar if he was in like a.
Oh yeah, he definitely could. But I think that the fact that he does it without a twin.
Yeah. Borden said he's like, how does he do it? Yeah, from the audience, it's a similar trick, but Borden's like, huh?
And Borden was frustrated by it, and you can see him talking to Fallon, because at this point his wife is dead. At this point, Olivia has left him because she realizes that, he has like she knows that something is off about him, right?
Yeah, because some days he doesn't seem to love her, and some days he does.
Mhm.
It's the same situation as Sarah. She just didn't realize that he had a twin. She never
Yeah.
realized. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
At that point, I think she just leaves. But my point is like when he talks with Fallon and he's like yelling at Fallon like, how does he do it? Like, why can't you outthink him? And then he's like, well, we should just leave him alone. Both of us just leave him alone, right?
yes, and I think that was that it's interesting. I feel like in this movie you could tell which twin it was, right?
Yeah.
There was
Yeah.
obviously one twin that was more aggressive, might not be the right word, but like, you know what I mean? Like more like dedicated. Like they wanted to keep like pushing the boundaries in terms of like the tricks and what they were doing, right? And the other one, I think that was the one who loved Olivia, but the one who loved Sarah was like more like, you know, like it's fine. Like we don't have to push so hard, you know, like we can let it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that the one who loved Sarah was the one who was like, let's just leave him alone.
Yes.
Like, we're fine. And then the other one goes to the show anyways, basically.
Yeah. And he went backstage, and this is what we saw at the beginning of the movie, right?
Yeah.
And this is where we realize everything, or start to put the pieces together, I should say.
Yes. We realize that Andrew was killing himself every night, right?
Every night he was killing a duplicate version of himself or himself. He's like, you know, I'll never know if I'm going to be the one in the water or the one on top, right?
Which I thought was weird because it's like,
aren't you always the one in the water?
And also you're always the one up top too, right? Like does he remember falling into the water? He doesn't, right? Because he just suddenly he's there and then he appears. So he has all of Angier's memories and everything. I just thought it was weird, like
because the duplicates have all the same memories and the same feelings, right? So
yeah, it's the same person, right?
It's the same exact person. Yep.
So
technically he should be feeling two different things at once, which it makes no sense.
So the guy that says, I didn't know if I was going to be ending up in the water or like be the person in the Prestige, like I felt like that was a weird line because he was never the person in the water. He would never.
But he was also always the person in the water.
No. He wasn't ever, because he doesn't have those memories because the person in the water died, right?
True.
He's always been the person who was in the Prestige, and that's why he's
not always, right? Because the person in the Prestige has to go back through, and then that version drops in the water, and then there's a new one that comes up as the Prestige. Right,
but that new one, that new one that comes out doesn't remember dropping in the water. So the person who's alive can never remember the suffering that was the drowning.
Yes, right? That's true, but they have all the same. I don't know if that's true actually, because they have the same memories. Remember, so if one becomes the Prestige, they're Angier. They go through the trick again. That version drops into the water. A new one comes out as the Prestige, but they have the same past memories.
But that new one doesn't. But that new one still doesn't have the drowning memories. Still doesn't, because they start existing at the moment the machine implicates them, which is before the drowning begins.
It's as the drowning. Yeah, it's as the drowning begins. Yeah.
Right.
It's a weird. You should be right in theory, but the way he says it in dialogue, and maybe this is the flaw in the dialogue.
I just thought it was weird.
A flaw in the dialogue, yeah. Or a flaw.
Because, like, he says it takes courage. Well, like, sure, when you walk up there, you could be the one dying. But the person that is saying that now has never been the one dying.
Yeah, by the way, when he says it takes courage, I didn't like that at all. It doesn't take. He said it takes courage to basically kill a duplicate of yourself every night. Like that's at this point. By the way, I thought Angier was an absolutely terrible. I didn't like it. I started to really dislike him at this point. He was going way too far with his trick. Obviously, you know, killing yourself or a version of yourself every night.
It's still a person, right? It's him.
It's not like it's like some like empty shell that knows nothing. Like it's someone with full memories and understanding of himself. So I really didn't like how like immoral he became, and it just shows you how immoral he became, right? It shows you the evolution of him. Yeah. And sorry, go ahead.
Well, basically, Borden tries to save the drowning Angier when he finds him.
Gets framed.
But yeah, Cutter assumes that he was the one who put the tank there or something like that.
And he goes to jail.
Yeah, he goes to jail. Basically, they find him guilty, you know. And also, I thought it worth pointing out that we didn't mention this, but when he's reading Angier's journal about like the Tesla stuff in prison, there's a
Yep.
point where he ends it and he's like addressing Borden, and we find out that like he wrote that journal for Borden, and Borden doesn't believe it because Borden's like, no, he's dead. Like, how could he do that?
Yeah, he's like, you
Yeah.
think I'm dead in the journal or something.
Yeah, and he mentions like you're sitting in a jail cell for my
Mhm.
murder, which means that he planned for Borden to go down there.
Yes.
Somehow he knew Borden was going to do that. I don't know how. And how he
I-
knew it was going to be that night,
think-
I don't know.
Two things. One, I think it's fair to say that he would go down there because they've magician's curiosity. I understand that. I believe that
Yeah.
he wanted to know how he did it.
Mhm.
And also talking about how do you know it was that night? I don't think he knew it was that night. I think it could have been any night.
So
Right,
then why
he did it
didn't-
every
so
night.
then why didn't he walk out as for the Prestige again? Like, how did the Prestige like?
Because
Angier-
because that same night Borden got arrested. Like it wasn't like he got arrested like a week later.
No, I know, but it's like pretty instantaneous, right? Like he disappears for a second and then he walks out in the Prestige, right?
Oh, that's true. How did he not walk out as a Prestige that night?
Yeah, like how did he know not to walk out?
The only explanation is that he saw Borden in the crowd. Because I don't think Borden was wearing much of
Yeah.
a disguise.
Or yeah,
He must
I
have
guess
recognized him
that's
in the
only-
crowd is the only real explanation that I can pinpoint. But
Mhm.
From this point on, he's in jail. And soon after this, right, we learn, or Borden learns, right, that
Mhm.
Angier is actually alive. And that Angier is Lord Caldlow.
Lord Caldlow, yeah.
And he's taking his daughter, which again, to me, here comes another point, Connor, where I just really despise Angier. He not only has to put Borden, he thinks only one Borden exists, in jail.
And to his
But
death, essentially.
And
to his death.
basically kill him.
Mhm.
And steal his daughter from him, like in front
And like
of him
rub it
as
in
well.
his face too.
Yeah, and then even Cutter, when he came to visit Angier, was like, he thought he was visiting Lord Caldlow. He's like, seriously? Like you took his daughter? Like really?
And he's
Like-
like, there's a man who's about to be killed for your murder and you're still alive here.
Yeah. And even Cutter is disgusted, a guy who stood by him through so much for so long and was working with him for decades or years at least.
Yeah, and I think Cutter's perspective throughout most of the movie is that Angier is the one who's really hurting, who really lost someone, and so he's the one who deserves his help.
And that's why he like
Not
stuck with
Borden.
him more. Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. And then he realizes that that's not the case anymore.
Mhm.
And basically, right, this is really the climax. This is pretty much the end of the film. And we get to the very end, right? And
Yeah. And Borden,
and Borden's about to get executed, correct?
well, he meets with Fallon first of all, and he's like, "Live for both of us. I'm sorry about Sarah," and that kind of stuff, you know.
And at that moment, by the way, I know it's late, but when he said, like, when they had that meeting, at the start of the meeting, when he said live for both of us, I knew right there that he was his twin. Honestly, Connor, I thought he was his duplicate from the Tesla machine at first.
Really?
At first. And I'll tell you why in just a minute. But we get to this end part, right? And basically Fallon, who actually is Borden, the Borden who loves Sarah. The one who had the daughter. So I like that he's alive. That's cool that he's gonna live.
Yeah.
He reveals himself to Angier, shoots Angier, and reveals himself to be Borden and explains everything to him.
Yeah.
So he triumphed over him in the end,
Yes.
basically, which I thought was a great ending to that. It was really crazy, Connor, at least to me, because they took Borden to be sort of the bad guy of the rivalry.
Mhm.
They made him become the good guy in the rivalry, as Angier became the bad, obsessed, over the
Yes.
top, immoral kind of guy towards the end.
Yes.
I don't know what
That's
your thoughts
true.
are on the end of this.
Yeah. I mean, he explains to Angier how he did his trick with having a twin brother and how they were both found and they would switch out.
Mhm.
One of them loved Olivia, one of them loved Sarah. And then Angier explains to him how he did his trick, how it was actually a duplicate and he was killing himself every night.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I forget what comment Borden makes, but Borden makes a comment and Angier says something like, "You don't get it, do you?" Like it's about like their faces every night, like when you bring people wonder or something like that.
Yeah. Oh,
Which
sorry, you go ahead.
actually, you go ahead first because I
Yeah.
want to hear.
Well, I had a comment about that when Angier said it's about their face. He said like, it's about the wonder on their faces, right? It's something basically what he said. I didn't believe that for a second, Connor. I didn't believe
No,
that for a split
no,
second at all.
that's exactly what I was gonna say.
I did, like for him to say that had to have been some sort of coping mechanism, because there's no way in my mind that he did all that magic, did all those things to see the wonder on people's faces. I mean, maybe when he first started out, right? Maybe when he first, before the transported man.
Well, maybe he did because he wanted to see the wonder in people's faces at him, that he wanted people to be the most impressed by him.
But I don't think, I think at the
But
end of the day.
the way he framed it was like, it was like, I'm doing this for other people.
Yeah,
something.
and it was like, no, you're doing this to be better, and not only to be better, but to be better at any cost necessary. And I remember, Connor, this line. Borden said, "You have to get your hands dirty," and he didn't think Angier could get his hands dirty. He said that early on in the film, and Angier wouldn't get his hands dirty. He wouldn't even kill a bird.
Yeah, remember that the thing with Cutter? He was like, "I don't want to kill this bird," and so they made the trick where they didn't.
And look at him at the end of the movie, killing himself every night just to do a trick to best Borden.
Yeah.
So he really ended up getting his hands dirty. He did Borden dirty. He thought he killed Borden. He thought he took his daughter. He did it all.
I think that his
Borden
response.
outsmarted him.
I think the thing that Borden said that he responded to there was something about Borden said like a real trick takes sacrifice, and he's like, you don't know anything about that. And then Andrew was like, oh, you don't get it. Like it's not about like.
Oh yeah, I was like,
or
okay.
Something. I don't know. You know.
But anyway, yeah, Borden, this the one that loves Sarah, the one who has the daughter, ends up killing Angier, and that's that wraps that up.
And then he's with his daughter, and Cutter's with them too.
Yeah, so I did like that. I did like that ending. Now, Connor, I wanted to talk about real quick, before we go into like the final conclusion and our ratings of the movie. I wanted to talk about like why I thought initially that Borden was a duplicate. Initially, I'm like, wow.
Yeah, I have something else I want to talk about after that too. So
that's okay. That's okay. Yeah. I want to hear your thoughts on like the plausibility of this as well. So basically, I thought it was possible because Borden, right, first really gets the idea of committing to the trick. The first time he says it in the movie is when you see the old Chinese magician, right, which is around the time when he starts to go solo. That's the time when he first starts to go solo, and then you start to hear about the transport.
Well, that's right. That's right before Angier's wife dies.
Yeah, because I think he told Angier that he's like, you got to live the trick or whatever.
Yeah.
And soon after, right after that, he goes solo, and all of a sudden he has this crazy trick that he's about to do, right? And no one knows how to do it, and no one knows about it. Anyway, that coupled with the fact that when he told Angier, he wrote down what his trick is, like how he did it. He wrote Tesla, right? So from the audience's perspective, it's very plausible to believe that Borden knew about Tesla, not only about Tesla, but about Tesla's ability. And to me, it's a plausible conclusion to make that, because you know about Tesla and his science and what he can build, I thought it was possible that Borden had him build him a machine. He used the machine to duplicate himself once. Tesla talked about how dangerous the machine was and that it should be destroyed, so he destroyed the machine. And Borden agreed to do that. Borden, being the not as immoral guy as Angier, didn't need the machine. He just needed one duplicate to do the trick over and over again, right? Which is much more moral from your person's standpoint.
Right.
And I thought that it was a very plausible possibility, right? And I thought that was a cool debate you could have. Were they twins or were they duplicates? The only thing that didn't add up for the duplicates is that he had no idea what was happening when Angier was drowning. Like he thought he was actually drowning. Like he would have recognized like, oh, this is a duplicate, right? Like maybe like he would recognize the machine.
And he wouldn't have been puzzled by the trick in general.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. But I did think that was a really interesting thought. When I first saw that there was a twin, I was like, oh wow, this could have been a really, really interesting possibility.
And then also the fact that Tesla admits like he never built a machine for Borden, like.
Oh, of course, but I thought it was very possible he just wasn't being honest with Angier. But
but that would have been weird. Like, like if he had, like, might as well like tell him, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I felt as though he would have had
some sort of like scientific pride or something like.
Or maybe the ability to at least make it more easily than he did if he had already made it before. I don't know.
Maybe, yeah. But regardless, I thought it was a cool little thought that was a possibility. But you're right. It was clear that they were twins, and I honestly thought it would be cooler if they were duplicates. I'm going to be honest. Like, I feel like it would just have been. I think it would have been a cooler like Borden's like like he's just like a better person. Like, it would just been like he's a better person. Like he did it in a more
Maybe.
moral way.
But
I
also
don't know.
like, but also then it's not like he's cheating at his magicianry, if that's a word, you know, in the way that Angier is, because he's not actually bending the laws of nature or whatever to do his trick. He's just
He's just using a twin.
yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. I wanted to bring up the point that we talked about earlier that you said you don't feel like Borden changed by the end of the film.
Yeah.
You can go ahead, or do you want me to explain why I think he did change?
Yeah,
first?
I want to hear why you think he changed, and then I'll.
Okay, so
yeah.
So what I'm thinking mostly about is the beginning of the film, like the very beginning, when there's that scene where they're backstage with Angier's wife, and he's like complaining about the main magician and how he doesn't want to take any risks, and like he's not dedicated to the trick, and like a real trick, like you have to dedicate yourself to it and take risks. And then they go see the Chinese guy, and he like realizes, oh, he lives the trick, right? He has the dedication, and then he kind of embraces that mentality, and he uses Fallon for like the rest of the movie to kind of live his trick, right? Like he has to live like that, and the only reason that the two twins live like that is so that they can pull off that transported man trick, right? Like if they didn't want to do that trick, there would be no other reason to
of course
like that, right?
Yeah.
It's solely for that reason, and that's so important to him. It's so important to him that he values like keeping that facade up over his relationship with the women in his life. Both of them do, right?
Yeah.
Both of the twins do. But I think by the end, they see where that obsession has led them. Like, it's not just Angier's fault that one of the twins ends up in prison, right? Like, they've done stuff to egg Angier on and whatever. Like, their competitive nature has kind of gotten the better of him. Not that he should be executed. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying that I think that that they both realize. When I say he, I think I mean the one that survives.
So the one who loves Sarah is kind of the way I think of it.
Yeah. He realizes that his daughter is more important than any trick.
I figured you were going to say that. Yeah.
Right. And I think you could kind of see that by the end. You know, I mean, obviously you can't really like put it to the test because there's no twin anymore to keep that up, but
yeah. See, here's the thing is I would agree, but I would also disagree, because I think the reason you're seeing this evolution in Borden is because by the end of the movie, you're seeing, I feel like you're seeing the perspective of a guy who knows he won't be able to do the trick anymore.
Maybe.
And I feel
but
like
he does make that comment before he gets arrested about like, we should just leave him alone at this point. Like, we're done.
That is true. But that was the Sarah that was the one who loved Sarah. And that's the one who always seemed to have more care for like the family than the other one. Right?
I guess so. But the other one did care for Olivia, right?
But the other one, yes, and the other one at the end did clearly care for his daughter, Borden's daughter at the end, right? Do you remember he was mad that he was going to Lord Caldlow at the end?
Yeah, and you could tell that they both love that. But that's what I'm gonna say. You could tell they both loved that little girl so much, especially when she was like visiting the prison with the one that wasn't her father.
So you know that's a fair point. I think that maybe family became more important to him, or I think like the mortality of it all made him realize how important family was. So I suppose he did change a little bit. I just thought that I was more thinking of throughout the entire movie, he kind of stayed like, you know, I just felt like throughout the entire movie, generally, he evolved in just having a better outlet for like he wasn't obsessed. He just like loved what he did. Angier was obsessed. Borden I think just loved what he did and would do it.
Well, yeah. I mean, I do think there was a degree of obsession to it, but I think he handled it in a healthier way.
Yes.
And
yeah,
for the most part, accepting the fact that he traumatized two women in their lives, you know. But that was sad. Honestly, that was sad. We talked about that earlier. That was sad for all of them involved. But but I do agree that Angier progressively got worse and made
I'll tell you, I don't know if it was it Nolan's goal, but I really just hated Angier at the end. Like I really did. Like I don't
Yeah.
know if anyone. I really am curious to see if
Okay.
anyone was sympathetic with him at all.
Okay. When I first watched the movie, for the during the pretty much the whole movie, I more so identified with Borden, and I supported him more. Maybe it's because he was sort of
Same.
like the underdog in my mind, and like I felt like it wasn't really his fault that the wife died,
Oh, you're talking about yeah. Okay, Angier. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
or I'm talking about Borden.
Oh, okay. So you okay? Never mind.
I more identified with
yeah, yeah,
Borden
yeah, yeah,
the
okay.
first time I watched it through.
But not the second time or the third time. I mean.
Okay, so this yeah, well the second time too, yeah. Like I still like Borden a lot better than Angier, but this time I felt like Angier was more sympathetic, like at the beginning of the film. You
Oh
know?
well, yeah. Of course, at the beginning. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but I also think that I wonder how much each of them have on like how much screen time they each have. You know? That's what I wonder because it feels like a lot of the time especially in the first half of the film, it feels like Angier is supposed to be the protagonist because
If
you're with him a lot more on his journey than you are with Borden and his decisions.
it feels that way, and yet I always sided with Borden
Mm-hmm.
generally, and maybe
Yeah.
it was because I could see the slow, stupid. Like I could see the slope that he was going down, Angier.
Yeah.
And because I saw him like not being able to stop it, even though he was the good guy for most of the movie, I didn't really like. I just didn't really like
Well, okay,
the
yeah. For
direction he was
most of
going.
the yeah, most of the movie feels like Borden is living well, or he's making the most out of his life, and Angier is the one trying to supplant that and get involved and make it worse or better for him and like worse for Borden. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Sure. I mean, honestly, Connor, at the end of the day, I think this movie was it was certainly, I really liked it. I really liked the movie. I was gonna actually go ahead and just kind of like give like my, like a rating if that was okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we've given ample opinions on this movie so far, so I won't really, add too much more, but there weren't really many flaws in this movie. Like the only real flaws in this movie to me were, like you mentioned, the scenes on the mountain were a little slow at times, particularly at the beginning. I thought they were a little bit slow. And then I also thought that, there were some misleading points in regards to could Borden have been a duplicate? Like obviously you clear it up by thinking about it for a few minutes afterwards, but like, and I actually like when you think about like you're not sure about something in a movie like this, like it could be this or this. I think that's an entertaining debate to have, but I don't know if that was Nolan's intention. So like maybe I was just or other my friends were like totally misled for like a little bit, but I thought that was a possibility. So like that that's a good and bad thing. But overall, like I just thought this was really like it was a cool movie because you didn't know where it was gonna lead. And definitely, I know you haven't watched it like for the first time in years, Connor, but watching the first time through, like you really don't know that Borden has a twin.
That's absolutely true.
And it's really cool. Like you have no idea, and it's really cool when you finally find out. And you're like, wow, like it all makes perfect sense. So I thought that was really neat. And I really, although I really disliked Angier and his slide into obsession and just lack of morality. It was a good character arc, right, to have in the movie. I think that was neat. I also really like the lessons about like dedication to your craft, to a fault and obsession. I thought those were really good themes in the movie. So all in all, I mean, I really liked it. I mean, I was going to give it like a low A, like a 94 or something. I really did enjoy this movie. And I would watch it again. 100%. I would watch because I really want to see. This is a movie. I think it's totally different watching it for a second time.
Yeah. I mean, I think you summed it up pretty well. I agree with most of what you said, like with it being slow on the mountains, but I really like the scenes or the themes that it explored. In addition to what you said, it also really explored like relationships, both positive and negative relationships, really well too, I think. And I also really like how they took a concept of like magicians, especially magicians in the 1800s, and they wove such a complex story around it, right? I think a lot of props goes to Christopher Nolan for creating such engaging narratives in like all the films he does. But I don't know, it just feels like something about this is so magician-like, something about the whole plot it's like almost as if what Angier is saying at the end about he just does it to see the faces of wonder. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
It's almost as if Nolan is like saying that to us. Like that's why he makes movies. You know what I mean?
That's neat if you think of it that way.
Yeah.
That is pretty cool. Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, I thought it was slow in a couple of parts, and there were a couple of things that I think could have been maybe explained a little bit better, like how Angier like knew not to come out for the Prestige when Borden was getting arrested.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was already a long movie, so maybe they just didn't have time for that. And it didn't really bother me the first time through. It's only like watching it through again that I was like, wait a second, you know?
Sure.
And yeah, I really like the characters and the actors did a great job. I also really like the editing, the non-linear editing style with like the 3 timelines.
Yeah.
I thought it was like really engaging and complex, but it wasn't like needless. Like it added something to the story too. Yeah, I mean, I really like this film, and I used to tell people this is my favorite film actually for like a few years. Yeah. Pretty much. Wow. I think from like my senior year of high school until like last year, I would tell people it's my favorite film.
Really?
Yeah, I would give it probably a 96% because I really like it, and I think that it's worth those couple slow scenes, you know, to get.
Yeah, I mean,
to get that payoff at the end.
I mean, that's definitely a fair spot for it. A fair, number, 96%. I mean, you're right. I mean, I said 94. I think that for me, when I say 94, I still think that this is easily like it has to be probably top 10 for me. I don't know exactly where, but it has to be in the lower end of my top 10 of all my movies that I've watched. Limited number of movies I've watched in my life, but it's definitely up there.
Yeah, there are a few that I like better than it.
Same.
You know, obviously I think I gave The Fellowship of the Ring a 99%, but yeah. Anyways, I love this movie though. I think it's really good. Yeah. I think Nolan, it's a very underrated for as far as Nolan films go.
100%, and I don't think it's as well known. I mean, again, maybe I'm just ignorant, but I didn't know about it until very recently. So, I hope if you haven't seen it, go ahead and see it because it definitely is a really fun movie, a really entertaining movie.
Yes.
And it's a good one to watch.
Before we go, Ryan, I have one last question for you, which is, obviously, it was immoral for Angier to duplicate himself and kill himself every night, right? So his trick is immoral. But was Borden's trick immoral in the fact that he led this double life and put his family through all that trauma for the sake of his trick?
What he did wasn't immoral. No. What was immoral was him not telling his wife and Olivia. If he had told, and I understand why he didn't tell them, because if you care about your trick more than you care about your family, which he did for quite some time, you're not going to tell your family how you do your trick. But if he wanted to be fully righteous about it, he would have told his wife and Olivia
and trusted them not to tell anybody
who loved who and what was going on. But he wasn't a trustworthy person outside of himself.
I don't think he really trusted people. Yeah.
No, he did not. So I understand why he didn't do it, but he was definitely a better person than Angier.
Yeah. I think his relationship with the two twins, their brotherly relationship was just stronger than any other relationship that they could come across, right?
Yes.
Like,
to make that trick work though, you have to have
so much trust. So much trust. Yeah.
Each other, yeah.
And that's not to say that he was a great guy either though. Like he definitely did mean things, to put it like politely, you know.
Yeah. He did some wrong things as well. Yeah. Of course.
But yeah, I like it when it's like not clear cut, like this person is the best person ever, you know.
Part of what makes a movie good to me, Connor, and we can wrap this up here, I'm sorry, but is how much like debate and discussion you can have with other people about like, you know, characters and like the plot, right? So when you have all these questions and like different perspectives on what happened and like who's moral, who's not, and who's right and who's wrong, like I feel like that's a mark of a really like at least in intriguing, engaging movie.
Yeah, I agree.
At least to me. But
props to Michael Caine also for his performance and his character too.
Yeah. I forgot to mention that. But yeah, Connor, that just about does it, I think, for this episode. We talked for quite a while, but it was a great movie, so it was worth every minute. But I think that about does it. Connor, we will be back next week with a movie of your choice.
Yes, we will. Also, I don't know why Scarlett Johansson is in the center of the poster for this movie. Like, why? Why?
Is she really? That's funny.
Yeah. Anyways.
I mean, she was definitely a secondary character, to say the least. But yeah, Connor, we'll be back next week with another episode with a movie of your choice. So
yeah.
Until then,
all right.
We'll see you guys later.
See you later.